The restaurant was alive with soft music, the kind that made people forget the outside world for a little while. Candlelight flickered across polished tables, reflecting in crystal glasses and catching the shimmer of carefully arranged silverware. The air smelled of roasted meat and freshly baked bread, mingling with the faint aroma of expensive perfume. It was the kind of place where people came to see and be seen, where wealth and status were almost louder than conversation. Among all this grandeur moved Lila. She carried plates with a careful balance, her apron tied neatly around her waist, a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead from running back and forth between the kitchen and the dining area. Her steps were light but precise, practiced from years of serving tables. She smiled politely at guests, taking their orders with a soft, steady voice, never letting her nerves show even when the evening crowd grew demanding. Lila had been working here for a few years, and over time she had become almost invisible to the elite guests. They noticed her when she arrived at the table with their wine, or when she refilled their water glasses, but rarely did they see her as a person. She had grown used to it, learning to move among the privileged crowd with quiet efficiency. The restaurant had a grand piano in one corner of the room. Every evening, a professional pianist would play, filling the space with melodies that made the chandeliers sway in rhythm. Lila often found herself drawn to the piano when she had a moment to breathe. She would pause for a few seconds, just long enough to admire the musician's skill, the way their fingers moved so confidently over the keys. The music was a world apart from her own, a world she loved and longed to be a part of. At home, Lila's apartment was small and simple, filled with second-hand furniture and the clutter of everyday life. But there was a piano there, slightly out of tune but full of potential. Every night after her shifts ended and the city's lights dimmed outside her window, she would sit down and play. She did not play for anyone but herself, letting her fingers follow the music she felt in her heart. The notes became a refuge, a way to escape the constant demands of serving and cleaning, the endless rounds of polite conversation and forced smiles. In the solitude of her apartment, she could dream, imagine herself in that restaurant, playing in front of an audience that actually listened. Tonight was no different from other evenings. The restaurant was packed, laughter and murmurs blending with the soft piano music in the background. Lila moved quickly from table to table, pouring wine, refilling bread baskets, and responding to polite requests with practiced grace. The guests were elegant, their clothing immaculate, their manners refined. Some were here for a celebration, others for a business dinner, but all shared the same air of quiet superiority. Lila watched them, noting the slight impatience in some of their gestures, the subtle ways they judged the space and the people in it. She reminded herself that she was part of this world, in her own way, even if only in the margins. As she walked past the piano again, Lila paused just long enough to look at the musician. The pianist was skilled, moving with ease, making the complex notes seem simple and effortless. There was a grace in every movement, a confidence that Lila admired deeply. She imagined herself there, sitting at the piano, playing the same notes with that same command. It was a thought that both thrilled and terrified her. She had always known she could play, but performing in front of others, especially the kind of crowd that frequented this restaurant, was another matter entirely. A small accident broke her thoughts. A guest had dropped a napkin, and she bent quickly to pick it up, smoothing it before returning it to the table. The guest smiled politely, not realizing how close they had come to a spill or a mess. Lila straightened up and exhaled softly, her heart still racing from the near mishap. It was a reminder that no matter how much she dreamed, the real world was demanding, unforgiving, and relentless. She pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the next table, the next drink, the next smile she had to offer. Despite the constant movement, Lila found moments where she could let her mind drift. She imagined herself playing a piece so beautiful that the guests would stop talking, would listen, would be moved by something real, something pure. She imagined the surprise on their faces, the disbelief that someone like her could produce such music. The idea made her smile, but she quickly tucked it away, knowing it was just a dream. Dreams were for home, for the quiet apartment where no one could see the trembling excitement in her hands as she played. The evening wore on, the crowd growing louder, more animated as courses were served and finished. Lila moved through the room with careful steps, attentive to every need. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and kept track of special requests, her mind always 2 steps ahead of the guests' needs. The piano continued to play, a constant presence in the background, weaving a soundtrack that made the bustling room feel almost magical. Layla's eyes kept returning to it, her fingers itching to feel the keys beneath them, to let the music flow from her soul into the room. In a brief lull, she had a moment to herself. She leaned against a nearby pillar, taking a sip of water, and let her eyes wander to the piano once more. The musician played with such confidence, such ease, that it was hard not to feel a pang of longing. Layla remembered her first piano lessons, the excitement of discovering that her fingers could create something beautiful. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing in secret, the joy and frustration of learning, the quiet victories of mastering a difficult piece. All of it had led her here, even if no one knew. A sudden noise startled her, a clatter from the kitchen as a tray fell. Layla moved quickly to help, her hands steady as she picked up the mess and ensured no one noticed. The manager gave her a brief nod of appreciation, but there was no time to linger. The restaurant demanded constant attention, and she had to be everywhere at once. Still, in those brief seconds, she allowed herself a small smile. She was part of this world in her own way. She was capable, she was valued, even if only in small ways. The night continued, each hour blending into the next. Layla worked tirelessly, her movements almost automatic now. She had become a master of balancing the needs of others with her own quiet dreams. She knew that her life was not extraordinary in the eyes of the world, but in her heart she held something precious. Her music, her passion, her dream of playing in front of an audience. The piano in the corner of the restaurant seemed to call to her, a silent invitation that she could not yet accept. As the final courses were served and the last guests lingered over coffee and conversation, Layla allowed herself a moment to breathe. She glanced at the pianist, now packing up for the night, and felt a strange mixture of admiration and envy. One day, she thought, one day that could be her. She could play and people could listen, really listen and feel something. The thought filled her with both excitement and fear. It was a dream she had carried for years, quietly, privately, but tonight it felt closer somehow, almost tangible. Closing her eyes for a moment, she let herself imagine the applause, the smiles of genuine appreciation, the recognition of talent and effort. She imagined the joy of sharing something deeply personal with a crowd, of connecting through music in a way words never could. The thought made her hands itch to play, her heart pound with anticipation. She shook her head slightly, trying to keep the feeling contained. The night was not yet over, and there was still work to do. As the restaurant emptied and the chandeliers dimmed, Layla finished her final rounds. She cleared the last table, washed the few remaining dishes, and straightened the chairs. The piano, now silent, seemed to watch her, a reminder of the world she longed to enter. She carried her bag and coat, gave a polite nod to the manager, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city was quiet, the streets glowing softly under the streetlights. She walked home, her mind replaying the melodies she wished she could play in the restaurant, imagining the faces of the guests as they listened. Arriving at her small apartment, she set down her bag and opened the door. The familiar scent of home greeted her, and there it stood, her piano waiting patiently. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys, and for a long moment did nothing. Then slowly she pressed down and the music began to flow. It was imperfect, a little shaky, but it was hers, and it filled the room with life and hope. In those notes she found peace, joy, and the courage to dream. The ordinary world of waiting tables and polished silverware faded away, and all that remained was the music and the promise of what could one day be. Layla played long into the night, losing herself in the melodies, feeling the dreams she had kept hidden for so long stir to life, and as the city slept outside, she knew deep down that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The morning started like any other, with the soft light of dawn slipping through the windows and the distant hum of the city waking up. Layla sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the quiet moments before the world demanded her attention. She sat at her small kitchen table, her fingers tapping absent-mindedly against the mug, and thought about the restaurant and the piano that had filled her dreams for so long. It was a normal day on the surface, but beneath it, a current of anticipation flowed. Something about today felt different, though she could not yet name what it was. Arriving at the restaurant, she was greeted with the familiar clatter of dishes, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the gentle murmur of staff getting ready for the day. The kitchen was a well-organized chaos, everyone moving with practiced efficiency. Lila slipped into her apron, feeling the comfort of routine settle around her like a familiar cloak. Yet there was an edge of excitement as she moved among the tables, arranging cutlery and polishing glasses. She did not yet know that today would be unlike any other she had ever worked. As the lunch crowd began to gather, the usual energy filled the air. Patrons arrived with hushed conversations and careful manners, their footsteps echoing lightly across the polished floor. Lila moved among them, attentive to every need, taking orders, serving drinks, and offering smiles that were polite but genuine. She noticed small details, the slight frown of a woman trying to choose between two dishes, the impatient glance of a man tapping his watch, the delicate way a child twirled a napkin in their hands. She had learned to read these subtle cues over time, understanding what would make each guest feel comfortable and cared for. In the corner of the room, the piano stood silently, a dark and polished presence. The usual pianist was nowhere to be seen, and a small ripple of concern passed among the staff. The manager's face was tense as he spoke quietly to one of the servers, explaining that the musician had called in sick at the last minute. The restaurant would have to go on without live music, and for a place that prided itself on elegance, this was unusual and troubling. Lila's heart quickened at the news, her thoughts immediately going to the piano and the empty space that now waited. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Could she, a mere waitress, somehow fill that void? The manager was pacing, speaking with hurried intensity on the phone, trying to find a replacement. The kitchen staff glanced toward the piano, uncertain how the situation would be resolved. Lila lingered nearby, her hands busy with tasks but her mind already imagining herself sitting at the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys. She knew she could play. She had practiced for years in her tiny apartment, but the thought of performing in front of the restaurant's elite patrons, people who expected perfection and sophistication, was terrifying. Still, the desire to play was stronger than her fear. Finally, as the manager hung up, he let out a frustrated sigh and muttered to the staff that there was no one available to fill in. The pianist was not coming, and the music could not be postponed. The room was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the faint clinking of glasses and utensils. Lila took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. She offered to play. The words felt strange as they left her mouth, almost as if she were surprised to hear herself say them. The staff turned toward her in astonishment. The manager stopped in mid-step, looking at her with raised eyebrows. "You?" he asked, incredulous. "But you're a waitress." "You don't— I can play," Lila interrupted gently, trying to mask the nervous quiver in her voice. "I've been practicing for years. I can do it." The manager hesitated, weighing the risk. He could imagine the guests' reactions if a waitress attempted to perform on the grand piano, in front of a room full of discerning patrons. Yet he saw the determination in her eyes, the quiet courage that came from someone ready to take a chance. He nodded slowly, deciding that this might be the only option. The staff exchanged surprised glances, unsure what to make of the situation. Lila approached the piano, each step echoing softly against the polished floor. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of nerves and excitement. The guests, sensing something unusual, began to look around, curious about the sudden shift in the atmosphere. She reached the piano and rested her hands lightly on the keys, feeling their smooth surface beneath her fingers. The instrument was grand, elegant, and slightly intimidating, but it also called to her, inviting her to bring music into the room. The first few notes were hesitant, soft, almost like a whisper. Lila's fingers moved carefully, finding the right keys, testing the resonance of the instrument. She could feel the attention of the room settling on her, the subtle shift in energy as the guests realized something unexpected was about to happen. The whispers started quietly at first, questions and murmurs of surprise. A waitress? Playing the piano? But the notes began to grow more confident, more fluid, carrying a warmth and emotion that drew the listeners in. As Lila continued, her nerves began to settle. She remembered the hours of practice in her apartment, the quiet nights filled with music and dreams. Each note became more certain, more expressive, as if the piano itself recognized her skill and welcomed her. The room fell into a kind of hush, the usual chatter fading as patrons turned their attention toward her. Even the manager, who had been standing tensely to the side, watched in astonishment, realizing that something remarkable was unfolding before him. The music flowed naturally now, guided by Lila's heart and years of secret practice. She played with a tenderness and grace that seemed to touch everyone in the room. The elite crowd, known for their refined tastes and critical eyes, began to lean in, their expressions softening as the melodies filled the space. Some held their breath, captivated by the unexpected talent, while others exchanged amazed glances, unable to hide their admiration. The restaurant had transformed from a place of polite elegance to a space alive with emotion and wonder. Lila's confidence grew with each passing moment. She felt a sense of freedom and exhilaration, the kind that only comes from stepping beyond fear and embracing one's passion. Her fingers moved with precision and feeling, creating harmonies that seemed to lift the room. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was a story, a reflection of her dreams, struggles, and determination. Every chord resonated not only through the piano, but through the hearts of the listeners. Some patrons were visibly moved, their eyes glistening as they listened. Others leaned closer together, whispering to one another, astonished at the performance. It was a rare moment, the kind that reminded everyone present of the unexpected magic that life could offer. Lila's playing was a bridge between worlds, the ordinary and the extraordinary, the hidden and the visible, the dreamer and the observer. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, caught in the spell of her music. The manager felt a swell of pride and relief. He realized that in her courage, Lila had not only saved the evening, but had elevated it to something unforgettable. The staff, initially skeptical, now watched with admiration, feeling inspired by her bravery and skill. It was a moment of recognition, a reminder that talent and passion could emerge from the most unlikely places, and that sometimes, the people we least expect are capable of extraordinary things. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room was silent for a heartbeat, savoring the resonance and beauty of what had just occurred. Then slowly the applause began, growing louder and louder, filling the restaurant with warmth and excitement. Patrons rose from their seats, clapping with genuine appreciation, some cheering softly. Lila looked up, her face flushed with a mixture of relief and joy. She had done it. She had taken a step into the unknown and found herself shining. The evening continued, but the energy had shifted. Guests approached her with smiles and compliments, expressing their surprise and delight. Some asked where she had learned to play, others simply shook their heads in amazement. The piano, once a silent observer, had become a vessel for her courage and talent. Lila realized that she had not only shared her music, but had also shared a piece of herself, a hidden dream that had now become visible to the world. When the restaurant finally quieted down and the last patrons left, Lila sat at the piano for a few moments, letting the silence wash over her. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a recognition that stepping forward, despite fear, could open doors she had only imagined. It was a night she would never forget, the night when a simple waitress discovered the power of her own courage and the magic that came from embracing her dreams. And as she left the restaurant, walking home through the quiet streets, she carried with her a newfound confidence and hope, knowing that this was only the beginning of a remarkable journey. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm after the extraordinary performance, but Lila could not sleep. Her mind kept replaying every note, every chord, every reaction of the audience. The memory of the guests' surprise, their applause, and their whispers of admiration felt almost unreal. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers twitching as if they still held the piano keys. The experience had awakened something deep inside her, a mixture of pride, excitement, and an unfamiliar sense of purpose. She had always dreamed of playing in front of an audience, but now she had done it, and the reality was more powerful than she had imagined. The next morning, Lila woke up early, eager to start the day but also filled with a restless energy she could not quite place. The city outside her window was coming alive, the sounds of traffic, footsteps, and distant voices blending into a familiar urban symphony. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth calm her nerves as she thought about what had happened the night before. Something had shifted. She was no longer just a waitress who loved to play piano in private. She had stepped into the light, even if only for a moment, and it felt transformative. Arriving at the restaurant, Lila noticed small changes immediately. The staff were talking quietly about the performance, their voices filled with admiration and surprise. The manager greeted her with a small smile, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and curiosity. Even some of the regular patrons who had seen her play stopped to offer words of praise. Lila felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt that her passion and her work could coexist in the same space, that her dream and her daily life did not have to be separate. As she moved through the dining area, preparing for the lunch crowd, she noticed the subtle ways people's attitudes had shifted. Some guests arrived early, hoping to catch a glimpse of the pianist who had so unexpectedly captured the room the night before. Others glanced at her with newfound respect, as if acknowledging that talent could come from anyone, regardless of their role. Lila felt a mixture of humility and pride, understanding that her actions had left an impression, even in such a brief moment. The piano in the corner of the room seemed to call to her again, its polished surface gleaming under the soft lighting. She approached it during a quiet moment, running her fingers lightly over the keys. The memory of her performance from the night before surged through her, bringing a flush of excitement. She imagined playing again, not just for the guests, but for herself, to feel the music flow freely and to test the limits of her own abilities. The thought was thrilling but also terrifying. Could she replicate the magic of that first performance? Could she truly rise to the occasion if another opportunity presented itself? By mid-afternoon, the restaurant had settled into a steady rhythm. Lila moved with confidence, her movements precise and deliberate, attentive to the needs of the guests. Yet she could not shake the feeling that something was about to happen. She felt a tension in the air, a subtle shift that made her senses sharper, her awareness more acute. And then it came, a small commotion near the manager's office. Lila watched as he spoke quickly with a phone pressed to his ear, his expression serious and slightly concerned. The pianist had canceled future performances for an extended period due to personal reasons, leaving a significant gap in the restaurant's entertainment schedule. The news spread quickly among the staff, and Lila's heart raced as she realized what it meant. The piano would remain silent unless someone stepped forward. A sense of responsibility washed over her. She knew she had the skill, and she could feel the growing expectation from the staff and even from some of the guests who had witnessed her previous performance. This was a moment that required courage, a moment where she could either rise to the occasion or retreat into the safety of her usual role. Taking a deep breath, Lila approached the manager. She felt the weight of the decision pressing on her, but also an inner determination she could not ignore. She offered to play again, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. The manager's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and hope crossing his features. He hesitated, clearly aware of the risk, but then he nodded slowly. The restaurant would need her music, and perhaps this was the opportunity she had been waiting for all along. As she moved toward the piano, Lila felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The staff watched her with quiet anticipation, the patrons' conversations lowering to whispers as they sensed something unusual was about to unfold. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the familiar texture of the instrument beneath her touch. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first note. Lila closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, and then began to play. The initial notes were tentative, soft, as if testing the waters. But with each passing moment, her confidence grew. The music began to flow more freely, each chord imbued with emotion and precision. The patrons, initially curious, were drawn in, their attention fully captured by the unexpected performance. Lila felt the energy of the room responding to her, the subtle nods of approval, the smiles of appreciation, the collective shift in focus. It was a delicate dance between her skill and the audience's reception. A silent conversation carried through melody and harmony. As she continued, her nerves settled further, replaced by a sense of flow and connection. The music became an extension of her, expressing feelings and stories she had kept hidden for so long. The patrons were no longer just observers. They were participants in a shared experience, their emotions entwined with the notes that filled the room. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others leaned forward, captivated by the beauty and complexity of the performance. Lila could feel the room breathing with her, a living, responsive audience that elevated her playing. The manager watched from the side, his earlier doubts replaced by awe. He had never seen anyone step forward with such courage and deliver something so moving, especially not a staff member whose daily work was far removed from the stage. The staff, too, were inspired, their skepticism transformed into admiration. Lila's performance reminded everyone that talent could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest moments arise when courage meets opportunity. The piece Lila played was longer and more intricate than the night before, showcasing both technical skill and emotional depth. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, each chord resonating with intention and feeling. The patrons were mesmerized, some exchanging astonished glances, others sitting in quiet reflection, fully immersed in the music. The room seemed suspended in time, the outside world fading away as the piano's melody filled every corner. Lila felt a profound sense of fulfillment, the kind that comes from truly sharing one's passion and connecting with others through art. When the final notes echoed and lingered in the air, the room erupted in applause. Patrons rose from their seats, clapping enthusiastically, some cheering softly. Lila looked up, her face flushed with a combination of relief, pride, and joy. She had faced her fears, stepped into the unknown, and discovered the power of her own courage. The music had not only moved the audience but had also transformed her, revealing a strength and confidence she had not fully recognized before. After the performance, guests approached her with smiles, compliments, and expressions of genuine admiration. Some asked where she had learned to play, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The piano, once a silent observer, had become a conduit for her courage and talent. Lila realized that her journey was no longer just a private dream. It had become a shared experience, one that left an indelible mark on those who witnessed it. As the evening wound down and the last guests left, Lila sat at the piano, letting the silence wash over her. The room was still, filled with the echoes of what had been played and the memory of the emotions stirred. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had risen to the challenge and embraced an opportunity that had seemed daunting only hours before. It was a night that would remain with her forever, a turning point that confirmed the power of courage, passion, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Walking home later, the streets quiet under the soft glow of streetlights, Lila felt a sense of peace and purpose she had never known. The city, alive with distant sounds and subtle movement, seemed to hum with possibility. She carried with her the knowledge that she had faced her fears, shared her talent, and touched the lives of others through her music. And as she approached her small apartment, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold. One note, one performance, and one courageous step at a time. The restaurant had a soft glow that evening, the chandeliers casting gentle light across the polished tables. Patrons arrived with a sense of expectation, some glancing around curiously, whispering about the waitress who had surprised them with her piano performance. Lila moved through the room with her usual grace, carrying trays and taking orders. But beneath her calm exterior, a storm of anticipation brewed. She knew that tonight could be even more challenging than before. The memory of the last performances lingered in her mind, and with it, both excitement and fear. As she approached the piano, her heart pounded in rhythm with the quiet music that the previous pianist had left behind. The keys glimmered under the soft lights, polished and inviting. Lila's fingers hovered over them, feeling the texture, recalling the melodies she had played countless times in the solitude of her apartment. She took a deep breath, centering herself, reminding herself that the music was hers, that the talent had always been within her. The audience might be elite, refined and critical, but for the first time, Lila felt ready to meet their gaze, ready to express herself fully. The staff gathered discreetly at the edges of the room, curious to see what would unfold. The manager watched with a mixture of apprehension and hope, knowing that Lila's music had the power to transform the atmosphere. Patrons settled into their seats, some whispering with anticipation, others simply waiting to be surprised. The restaurant was alive with quiet energy, a tension that was both thrilling and intimidating. Lila's pulse quickened, but she reminded herself to focus on the music, to let it flow through her rather than be constrained by fear. The first notes were tentative, almost like a whisper in the vast room. Lila allowed herself a moment to adjust, to feel the resonance of the piano and the way the room responded to her touch. Slowly the melody began to grow, soft at first, then gradually gaining confidence. Each chord seemed to fill not just the physical space but the emotional space of everyone present. Patrons who had come expecting a quiet dinner found themselves drawn in, leaning forward, their attention captured by the unexpected performance. Lila's fingers danced across the keys with a fluidity born of years of practice. The music became a story, a conversation without words expressing her joy, her hope, and the courage it had taken to step into this moment. The crowd was silent, fully engaged, as if each note carried a message meant just for them. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched in amazement, captivated by the skill and emotion that emanated from the young woman before them. With each passing moment, Lila felt her confidence grow. The earlier nerves melted away, replaced by a sense of flow that was both exhilarating and liberating. She realized that the audience was not an obstacle, but a partner in the experience, responding to the energy and emotion she poured into the music. The room seemed to move with her, the subtle swaying of chandeliers, the gentle shifting of patrons in their seats, all in harmony with the notes she played. It was as if the restaurant itself had become part of the symphony. The manager's expression softened, a smile of genuine admiration crossing his face. He had witnessed many performances, but few had the raw authenticity and talent that Lila displayed. The staff, initially skeptical, now watched with awe, realizing that the young waitress had transcended her role, creating a moment of beauty and connection that none would forget. Patrons exchanged quiet, impressed glances, some whispering words of astonishment, others simply sitting in quiet appreciation, letting the music touch them in ways that words could not. As the piece progressed, Lila explored new dynamics, moving from soft, tender passages to more vibrant, expressive sections. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note deliberate, each chord infused with feeling. The audience could sense the depth of her skill and the sincerity of her expression. It was a rare combination, a technical mastery coupled with genuine emotion, and it captivated everyone in the room. Lila felt a sense of exhilaration, the kind that comes from stepping fully into one's passion, letting it shine despite fear and uncertainty. Some patrons were visibly moved, their eyes glistening as they listened. Others whispered in awe, commenting on the unexpected talent that had emerged from someone they had only seen as a waitress. The room was alive with a mixture of surprise, admiration, and emotional resonance. Lila, feeling the energy around her, allowed herself to be carried by the music, letting each note tell its own story, painting a picture with sound. It was not just a performance. It was a conversation between her and the audience, a shared experience that transcended social status and expectation. The tempo shifted, becoming more dynamic, more playful, reflecting the joy and spontaneity that Lila felt in the moment. Her confidence was growing, each passage flowing naturally into the next, her fingers finding the keys with ease and precision. The patrons leaned forward, fully engaged, captivated by the unexpected artistry. Even those who had been critical or skeptical before now watched in awe, their assumptions challenged by the brilliance of the performance. The music became a bridge, connecting the worlds of the elite audience and the humble waitress in a moment of shared human experience. As she played, Lila's mind wandered briefly to the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the quiet nights of practice in her small apartment, the moments of frustration and triumph, the long hours of dedication that no one had seen. She thought about the countless days she had spent serving tables, moving quietly through a world that rarely acknowledged her talents. And yet all of it had led to this moment, a moment where courage and preparation converged to create something extraordinary. The room seemed to hold its breath as the final section approached. Lila felt a mixture of excitement and melancholy, knowing that the piece was coming to an end. She allowed herself to savor each note, letting the melody linger, filling the space with warmth and emotion. Patrons were silent, caught in the spell of the music, their attention fully captured. It was a rare and powerful experience, the kind that leaves a lasting impression, a memory that will not fade. When the last note faded, the silence hung for a moment, almost reverent. Then slowly the applause began, growing louder and louder, filling the restaurant with energy and excitement. Patrons rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically, some cheering softly. Lila looked up, her face flushed with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it again, faced her fears, and shared her gift with the world. The music had not only moved the audience but had transformed her, revealing a strength and confidence she had not fully recognized before. Guests approached her with smiles and compliments, expressing genuine admiration and surprise. Some asked where she had learned to play. Others simply shook their heads, amazed at the talent they had witnessed. The piano, once a silent observer, had become a vessel for Lila's courage and creativity, a tool through which she could communicate with the world. She realized that her journey was no longer just a private dream. It had become a shared experience, one that touched everyone in the room and left an indelible mark on their memories. As the evening wound down and the last patrons left, Lila sat at the piano for a few moments, letting the silence envelop her. The room was still, filled with the echoes of her performance and the memory of the emotions it had stirred. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had risen to the challenge and embraced an opportunity that had seemed daunting only hours before. It was a night that would remain with her forever. A turning point that confirmed the power of courage, passion, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Walking home later, the streets were quiet under the soft glow of streetlights. Lila felt a sense of peace and purpose she had never known. The city, alive with distant sounds and subtle movement, seemed to hum with possibility. She carried with her the knowledge that she had faced her fears, shared her talent, and touched the lives of others through her music. And as she approached her small apartment, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold, one note, one performance, and one courageous step at a time. The evening had begun quietly, with patrons arriving in their elegant attire, their conversations hushed as they settled into the restaurant's polished chairs. Lila moved among them with practiced ease, taking orders, pouring drinks, and offering smiles that hid the flutter of anticipation in her chest. She knew tonight could be different. The memory of her previous performances lingered in her mind, both a source of confidence and a reminder of the expectations now resting on her shoulders. The restaurant had become a place of possibility, a stage where her talent could shine, and she was determined not to let fear hold her back. The piano in the corner gleamed under the soft lighting, calling to Lila with a silent invitation. She approached it, fingers brushing the polished keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her touch. The room seemed to hold its breath, sensing the significance of the moment. Patrons were already whispering among themselves, curious about the young waitress who had captivated them with her music before. Lila took a deep breath, centering herself, letting the memory of her private practice sessions guide her. This was her moment, and she would embrace it fully. As she began to play, the first notes were soft, tentative, almost like a gentle greeting. But with each chord, confidence grew. The melody flowed naturally, each note carrying emotion, telling a story of courage and hope. The patrons, initially curious, were soon drawn in completely. Conversations faded, eyes turned toward her, and the room was transformed by the power of her music. Lila's fingers moved with precision and grace, each chord a reflection of years of practice and quiet dedication. She felt a connection with the audience, a shared understanding that transcended words. The music swelled, filling every corner of the restaurant with warmth and energy. Patrons leaned forward, some closing their eyes to fully absorb the performance, others exchanging amazed glances. Lila could feel the room responding to her, a silent dialogue that flowed between her and the audience. Every movement of her fingers, every subtle change in tempo seemed to evoke emotion, drawing the listeners deeper into the experience. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and wonder, a rare and magical moment that left everyone present captivated. Among the crowd, a well-known music producer had been quietly observing. He had come to the restaurant for a quiet dinner, unaware of the extraordinary talent he would encounter. As Lila played, he leaned forward, intrigued by the skill and emotion in her performance. He watched her fingers move across the keys, noting the confidence and expressiveness that belied her role as a waitress. He recognized something rare, something worth pursuing, and he made a mental note to speak with her after the performance. Lila, unaware of his presence, focused entirely on the music, letting it flow from her heart into the room. The manager and staff watched from the sidelines, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and pride. They had witnessed Lila's courage and talent, and it had transformed not only the atmosphere but also their perception of what was possible. The patrons, elite and refined as they were now fully engaged, some leaning forward in amazement, others simply sitting in quiet awe. Lila felt a sense of fulfillment, realizing that her music could touch people deeply, that her quiet passion could resonate with those around her in a meaningful way. The piece evolved, moving from soft, introspective passages to more vibrant and energetic sections. Lila's fingers flew over the keys with skill and precision, the melodies flowing seamlessly, a testament to her years of dedication and practice. The audience was captivated, their attention fully absorbed by the performance. Some were visibly moved, their eyes glistening with emotion, while others whispered softly, sharing their astonishment at the unexpected talent before them. It was a rare moment of connection, a shared experience that transcended the boundaries of social status and expectation. As she continued, Lila felt herself becoming fully immersed in the music. The room seemed to breathe with her, responding to each note, each chord. Patrons were no longer mere observers. They were participants in a shared journey, traveling with her through the ebb and flow of the melody. Lila's confidence grew, each passage flowing effortlessly into the next, her fingers finding the keys with natural ease. The audience was spellbound, caught in the magic of the moment, experiencing the raw beauty of talent and courage converging. The producer, intrigued and impressed, silently observed Lila, recognizing the potential for a much larger stage. He noted the authenticity of her performance, the depth of emotion she conveyed, and the undeniable skill that shone through every note. He realized that he had stumbled upon a rare talent, someone who could captivate an audience not just with technical ability, but with the genuine expression of passion. Lila, unaware of his attention, continued to play, lost in the music, her mind and heart fully engaged in the performance. The room was completely transformed. Patrons who had arrived expecting a quiet dinner were now experiencing an extraordinary performance. The music created a bridge between Lila and the audience, connecting them in a way that words could not. She felt a sense of liberation, the freedom that comes from fully embracing one's abilities and sharing them with the world. The audience responded, their admiration evident in their expressions, their gestures, and the quiet energy that filled the room. As the final section approached, the music became more dynamic, each note resonating with emotion and purpose. Lila's fingers moved with precision and grace, each chord building toward a powerful conclusion. The patrons were captivated, their attention fully absorbed by the performance. Some whispered in awe, others simply sat in quiet reflection, fully immersed in the music. Lila felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had shared something meaningful, that her talent and courage had left an impression on everyone present. When the last note faded, the room remained silent for a moment as if savoring the final echo. Then slowly applause erupted, growing louder and louder, filling the restaurant with energy and excitement. Patrons rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically, some cheering softly. Lila looked up, her face flushed with a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her gift, faced her fears, and captivated the audience once again. The music had not only moved the patrons but had also transformed her, revealing a strength and confidence she had not fully recognized before. Guests approached her with smiles and compliments, expressing genuine admiration and astonishment. Some asked where she had learned to play, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The piano, once a silent instrument, had become a vessel for Lila's courage and expression, a way to communicate with the world. She realized that her journey was no longer just a private dream. It had become a shared experience, touching the hearts of those who witnessed it. The evening had been extraordinary, a moment of connection, recognition, and transformation. As the night drew to a close and the last patrons departed, Lila sat at the piano, letting the silence envelop her. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had embraced the opportunity and risen to the challenge. The echoes of her performance lingered in the room, a reminder of the power of courage, passion, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Walking home later, the quiet streets bathed in soft light, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. Lila carried with her the knowledge that she had touched lives through her music, and that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold. One note, one performance, and one brave step at a time. The night had a different energy as the restaurant filled with patrons once again. People were buzzing with curiosity and anticipation, eager to witness the waitress who had captivated them before. Lila moved among the tables with her usual composure, taking orders, refilling glasses, and exchanging polite smiles. But inside her heart raced. Tonight felt monumental, like a turning point. She had performed before, yes, but something in the air suggested that this evening would be remembered for a long time. The piano in the corner, polished and shining under the warm lights, seemed to beckon her. Lila's fingers brushed over the keys as she approached, feeling the familiar texture and the energy of the instrument. She took a deep breath, centering herself. Every past performance, every quiet night of practice in her small apartment had led to this moment. She reminded herself that the music belonged to her, that her talent was real, and that sharing it with others was a gift both to herself and to those who listened. The staff watched quietly from the sidelines, their eyes wide with expectation. The manager, standing near the entrance, held a subtle but proud smile, knowing that Lila had already transformed the restaurant into a space of wonder on more than one occasion. Patrons settled into their seats, conversations lowering to murmurs as curiosity filled the air. There was a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Lila felt the weight of it, but also the exhilaration of possibility. As she began to play, the first notes were gentle and tentative, like a whisper inviting the audience to lean in. But the hesitation quickly melted away, replaced by the confidence and fluidity she had developed over countless hours of practice. The melody flowed naturally, each chord a reflection of her emotions telling a story without words. Patrons, initially curious, soon became entranced, their attention fixed on the young woman whose fingers danced across the keys. The music was alive, filling the room with warmth, beauty, and an unexpected intimacy. Lila allowed herself to be fully immersed, letting the energy of the room guide her playing. The audience responded subtly, leaning in, closing their eyes, or exchanging astonished glances. The music connected everyone, creating a shared experience that transcended social hierarchies. She could sense the room's energy shifting, each note drawing the listeners deeper into the story she was telling through her fingers. This was more than a performance. It was a dialogue, a bridge between hearts and souls. The piece evolved, growing more complex and expressive. Lila's fingers flew across the keys with skill and grace, each note deliberate, each chord infused with emotion. She had learned to trust her instincts, allowing the music to flow naturally rather than forcing it. The patrons were captivated, some visibly moved to tears, others simply sitting in awe, absorbing every nuance. Even the staff who had initially doubted her watched with admiration, realizing that they were witnessing something remarkable, a young woman turning an ordinary night into an unforgettable experience. Among the audience, a few people whispered about how they had underestimated her, marveling at her courage and talent. Lila, focused entirely on the music, was unaware of the individual conversations but could feel the collective energy of amazement and appreciation. Her performance had created a ripple effect, inspiring those around her and leaving a lasting impression. She realized that the power of her music was not just in the notes but in the courage it took to share them with others. The tempo shifted, moving from gentle, reflective passages to bold and dynamic sections. Lila's playing became more expressive, her emotions flowing freely through every movement of her fingers. The audience responded instinctively, leaning closer, listening intently and letting the music wash over them. Some whispered quietly to each other, astonished at the unexpected depth and mastery displayed by someone they had only seen as a waitress. Lila felt a sense of liberation and joy, knowing that she had tapped into something authentic and powerful. Her mind briefly wandered to her journey. The hours spent practicing in solitude, the quiet dreams she had carried for so long, and the determination that had kept her going through days of routine and hard work. She thought about how many times she had imagined this moment, yet reality surpassed even her most vivid dreams. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, a way to communicate feelings that words could never capture. And tonight it seemed her audience felt that too. The music became more intricate, each section flowing into the next seamlessly. Lila's confidence soared with every note. Patrons were fully engaged, their attention unwavering. Some held their breath, caught in the tension and beauty of the performance. Others leaned back, letting the melody wash over them, their expressions softening as they were transported by the music. Lila felt a profound connection with everyone in the room. a silent understanding that music could unite even the most diverse group of people. The final section approached, and Lila's fingers moved with precise determination. The notes were powerful yet tender, expressing both triumph and vulnerability. The patrons, sensing the climax, became silent in anticipation. It was a delicate balance between technical skill and emotional depth, and Lila navigated it flawlessly. Each chord resonated not just through the room but through the hearts of those listening. It was a moment suspended in time, a culmination of years of practice, courage, and dreams fulfilled. When the last note lingered and finally faded, the silence in the room was profound. Then slowly applause erupted, swelling into a wave of genuine admiration and excitement. Patrons stood, clapping enthusiastically, some cheering softly, others whistling in amazement. Lila looked up, her face flushed with relief, pride, and joy. She had done it. She had shared her gift, faced her fears, and created a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. The music had transformed the space and had transformed her. Guests approached her with smiles and compliments, expressing awe and disbelief. Some asked where she had learned to play. Others shook their heads, marveling at her courage. The piano had become a conduit for her passion, a way to communicate and connect with people on a level deeper than conversation. Lila realized that she had crossed a threshold. Her dream was no longer confined to her apartment or private practice. It had become a reality that touched lives, inspired hearts, and changed perceptions. The manager watched from the side, filled with pride. He understood that Lila's performance had elevated the restaurant to a level beyond what he had imagined possible. The staff who had once doubted her abilities now looked at her with admiration and newfound respect. Lila had proven that talent could emerge from unexpected places, and that courage and dedication could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences. As the night drew to a close, Lila sat at the piano quietly, letting the lingering echoes of her performance fill the room. She reflected on her journey, the obstacles she had overcome, and the courage it had taken to share her gift. The applause, the smiles, the admiration of the audience, they were all reminders that she had not only pursued her dream, but had succeeded in bringing it to life in a way that touched others. Walking home later, the city streets were calm and bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Lila felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. She knew that this night marked a turning point, the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold, one note at a time. Her music, once confined to private moments, had found its place in the world. And as she entered her apartment, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a dream realized and the excitement of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Lila sat at her piano, fingers hovering over the keys, and smiled. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next, her heart full, her spirit alive, and her music ready to shine.